The rain hammered the window of our Brooklyn apartment, a relentless drumbeat that matched the pounding in my chest. I was 22, gay, and hopelessly in love with my straight roommate, Ethan, who was sprawled on the couch, oblivious to the storm inside me. That summer night, everything I thought I knew about him and us shattered like glass under pressure. My name is Lucas, and I'd been sharing this cramped, fifth-floor walk-up with Ethan for 2 years. We met freshman year at NYU, bonded over late-night pizza and a shared obsession with indie music. He was the kind of guy who could charm anyone broad shoulders, a crooked grin, and a laugh that filled every corner of a room. I, on the other hand, was quieter, the introspective one who overthought everything, especially my feelings for him. I'd buried them deep, convinced they'd never see daylight. Ethan was straight. After all, he dated girls, flirted effortlessly, and never gave me a reason to hope. Until that night. It was July, the kind of sticky New York evening that made you want to peel off your skin. Ethan had just broken up with his girlfriend, Sarah, and was drowning his sorrows in cheap beer. I was sketching at the kitchen table, trying to ignore the way his t-shirt clung to his chest as he paced the room. "Luke, man, why does it always end like this?" he muttered, cracking open another can. His voice was raw, like he was unraveling. I set my pencil down, my heart doing that stupid flip it always did when he said my name. "Dunno, man," I said, keeping my tone light. "Maybe you're picking the wrong people." I regretted it instantly. His blue eyes locked onto mine, sharp and searching, like he'd caught something in my voice I hadn't meant to let slip. The air between us thickened, charged with something I couldn't name. He crossed the room in 2 strides and sat next to me, closer than usual. His knee brushed mine, and I froze. "You ever feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I swallowed hard, my pulse racing. I wanted to say, "Every damn day, Ethan. Every time I pretend I don't love you." But I just shrugged, muttering something about everyone feeling lost sometimes. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "Sarah said I'm emotionally unavailable. Whatever that means." He laughed, but it was hollow. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm just scared. The word hung there, fragile and heavy. Scared of what? I wanted to ask, but my mouth wouldn't move. The rain kept falling, and the room felt smaller, like the walls were closing in. Ethan turned to me, his face inches from mine. "You're the only one who gets me, Luke," he said, and there was something in his eyes, something new, something reckless. Before I could process it, he leaned in, his lips brushing mine. It was brief, barely a kiss, but it set my world on fire. He pulled back, wide-eyed, like he'd shocked himself. "Two didn't mean," he stammered, bolting to his feet. "Ethan, wait," I started, but he was already grabbing his jacket, muttering about needing air. The door slammed, and I was left alone, my lips tingling, my heart in pieces. What the hell just happened? The next morning, Ethan acted like nothing had changed. He made coffee, cracked jokes, and avoided my gaze. But I saw the way his hands shook when he poured the coffee, the way he flinched when I got too close. Something had shifted, and there was no going back. I didn't know if it was a beginning or an end, but I knew I'd spend the rest of the summer chasing the truth. For the next week, we danced around each other, the apartment a minefield of unspoken words. I caught him staring at me sometimes, his expression unreadable. At night, I'd lie awake, replaying that kiss, wondering if I'd imagined the longing in his eyes. I wanted to confront him, to demand answers, but fear kept me silent. What if he regretted it? What if he moved out, and I lost him entirely? One night, Unable to sleep, I found him on the fire escape, smoking a cigarette, a habit he'd sworn he'd quit. The city hummed below us, alive with possibility and chaos. "You gonna tell me what's going on?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. He exhaled a cloud of smoke, his jaw tight. "I don't know, Luke," he said finally. "I don't know what I'm doing." His voice cracked, and for the first time, I saw him not as the confident guy everyone loved, but as someone just as lost as me. It broke my heart and gave me hope all at once. We sat there in silence, the city lights flickering like stars. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay to be confused, to feel whatever he was feeling. But I didn't. Not yet. That summer night had opened a door, and neither of us knew what lay on the other side. All I knew was that our bond, our friendship, our everything was changing, and I wasn't sure either of us was ready for it. The days after that fire escape moment stretched into an uneasy truce. Ethan and I moved through our routines, classes, part-time jobs, late-night takeout, but the air between us crackled with tension. Every glance, every accidental touch, felt like a spark waiting to ignite something we couldn't control. I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way Ethan's laugh didn't quite reach his eyes anymore. The way he'd linger in the doorway, like he wanted to say something but couldn't find the words. I was drowning in my own questions, too. Had that kiss meant anything to him? Or was it just a drunken mistake, a fleeting moment he'd already buried? I hated how much I cared, how much I wanted it to mean something. One evening, about 2 weeks after the kiss, we went to a bar in the East Village with some friends. The place was packed, neon lights casting a surreal glow over the crowd. Ethan was his usual charming self, flirting with a girl named Mia who kept touching his arm. I sat in the corner, nursing a beer, my stomach twisting. I told myself I was fine, that I'd always known he was straight. But watching him lean into her, his smile bright and easy, felt like a punch to the gut. "Dude, you okay?" my friend Caleb asked, sliding into the booth next to me. Caleb was the only one who knew about my feelings for Ethan. He'd guessed it last year, cornering me after I'd gotten too quiet during one of Ethan's hookup stories. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a smile. "Just tired." Caleb raised an eyebrow but didn't push. "He's an idiot, you know," he said, nodding toward Ethan. "Doesn't see what's right in front of him." I didn't respond. What could I say? That I was terrified of ruining everything. That I'd rather have Ethan as a friend than not at all. I downed the rest of my beer and excused myself, needing air. Outside, the city buzzed with life taxis honking, laughter spilling from nearby bars. I leaned against the brick wall, closing my eyes. That's when I heard his voice. "Luke, what's up with you tonight?" Ethan was standing there, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "Nothing," I said too quickly. "Just needed a break." He stepped closer, and I could smell the whiskey on his breath. "You've been weird for weeks," he said, his voice low. "Is it because of what happened?" My heart stopped. He hadn't mentioned the kiss since that night. I opened my mouth to deny it, to laugh it off, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the same uncertainty I felt mirrored in his eyes. "Ethan," I started, but he cut me off. "I don't know what I'm doing." "Okay," he said, his voice breaking. "I keep thinking about it. About you. And it's freaking me out because I've never—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair. "I'm not gay, Luke. I can't be." The words hit like a slap, but there was no malice in them, just raw, desperate confusion. I wanted to scream that it didn't matter, that labels didn't have to define us. But all I could manage was, "You don't have to have it all figured out." He looked at me then, his eyes searching mine, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me again. But he didn't. He just shook his head and walked back inside, leaving me alone with the weight of his words. The next few days were torture. Ethan threw himself into distractions parties, late-night study sessions, anything to avoid being alone with me. I tried to give him space, but the apartment felt like a pressure cooker. One night, I came home to find him sitting on the couch, staring at his phone. The room was dark except for the glow of the screen. "Luke," he said without looking up. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. I sat across from him, bracing for the worst. He set his phone down and met my eyes, his expression a mix of determination and fear. "I've been doing some reading," he said. "About, being bi or whatever. I don't know if that's me, but I can't stop thinking about you. And it's messing with my head." I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Ethan, the guy who'd always seemed so sure of himself, was admitting he was lost. And for the first time, I felt like I had to be the strong one. "It's okay to not know," I said softly. "But you don't get to jerk me around while you figure it out." He flinched, and I regretted the edge in my voice. But I meant it. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, hoping for something he might never be ready to give. He nodded, his jaw tight. "I don't want to hurt you, Luke," he said. "You're my best friend." The word friend stung, but I saw the truth in his eyes. He was trying, in his own messy way, to be honest. And that was enough for now. We sat there in silence, the distance between us both a chasm and a bridge. The summer was far from over, and I had no idea where it would take us. But one thing was clear, we were in this together, whether we were ready or not. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk. Ethan and I settled into a fragile new normal, but every conversation felt like it could tip us into chaos. He was trying to understand himself, and I was trying not to let my heart break in the process. One Saturday, we decided to escape the city. Ethan suggested a day trip to Coney Island, something we hadn't done since our first year at NYU. I agreed, hoping the change of scenery might ease the tension. The subway ride was quiet, but not uncomfortable. He sat next to me, his shoulder brushing mine with every sway of the train. I tried not to read into it, but my mind was a traitor, replaying that kiss for the 1,000th time. The boardwalk was alive with summer energy kids screaming on rides, the smell of fried food in the air. Ethan seemed lighter here, his smile genuine as he dragged me toward the Ferris wheel. "Come on, Luke, don't be a wimp," he teased, and for a moment, it felt like old times. We climbed into the car, the city skyline stretching out before us as we rose into the sky. At the top, the wheel paused, leaving us suspended above the world. Ethan turned to me, his expression serious. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "About what I said at the bar. About us." My breath caught. And he looked away, his hands gripping the safety bar. "I don't know what I feel, Luke, but I know I don't want to lose you. You're the most important person in my life." The words were a lifeline and a wound all at once. I wanted to tell him I loved him, that I'd been in love with him for years. But I couldn't not when he was still grappling with his own truth. Instead, I said, "You won't lose me, no matter what." He nodded, and we sat in silence as the wheel began to move again. For the rest of the day, we were just Lucas and Ethan, laughing over cotton candy and bad arcade games. But the weight of his words lingered, a reminder that we were on borrowed time. Back in the city, things got complicated again. Ethan started going to therapy, something he'd never done before. He didn't talk much about it, but I could see the change in him, less guarded, more introspective. One night, he came home with a book on queer identity, its pages dog-eared and marked with notes. I caught him reading it on the couch, his brow furrowed in concentration. "You okay?" I asked, sitting next to him. He closed the book, his fingers lingering on the cover. "I'm trying to understand," he said. "I've always thought I was one way. You know. Straight. Normal. But now, I don't know. I keep thinking about that night. About you." My heart pounded, but I kept my voice steady. "What do you think it means?" He looked at me, his eyes raw with vulnerability. "I think I might be in love with you," he said, so quietly I almost missed it. "But I'm scared, Luke. I'm scared of what it means, of what people will think, of messing this up." I reached for his hand, my own trembling. "You don't have to have all the answers," I said. "But you don't have to do this alone." He squeezed my hand, and for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. It wasn't a declaration of love. Not yet, but it was a start. We stayed like that for a long time, hands clasped, the world outside fading away. The summer was slipping by, but in that moment, I felt like we had all the time in the world. Ethan's confession changed everything and nothing. We were closer than ever, but there was a new kind of tension, now one born of possibility rather than avoidance. I caught myself watching him more openly, noticing the way his eyes softened when he looked at me, the way his hand lingered when he passed me a coffee mug. But he was still holding back, and I could feel it. One night, we went to a queer open mic night at a local cafe. I'd been going for years, but it was Ethan's first time. He was nervous, fidgeting with his phone as we sat in the crowded room. The performers were a mix of poets, singers, and storytellers, their words raw and unfiltered. I watched Ethan's face as a trans poet shared a piece about identity, his expression a mix of awe and discomfort. "That was intense," he said afterward, as we walked home through the humid night. "I've never thought about things like that before. Like, how complicated it all is." "It's not always complicated," I said. "Sometimes it's just about being honest with yourself." He stopped walking, turning to face me. "I'm trying, Luke. I really am. But it's like, I've got this voice in my head telling me I'm supposed to be one way. And then there's you, and you make me question everything." I wanted to kiss him, to close the distance between us and make him see that it didn't have to be so hard. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "You don't have to fight it. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay." He nodded, but I could see the battle raging inside him. We walked the rest of the way in silence, the city a blur of lights and noise. When we got home, he hesitated at his bedroom door. "Can I stay with you tonight?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Not like that. Just, I don't want to be alone." My heart ached, but I nodded. We lay on my bed, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. His breathing was uneven, like he was holding something back. Finally, he turned to me. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," he said, "but I know I want you in my life. Always." I reached for his hand, intertwining our fingers. "I'm not going anywhere," I whispered. We fell asleep like that, side by side, the space between us shrinking with every breath. The next morning, things felt different. Lighter, somehow. Ethan made pancakes, humming off-key to a song on the radio. I watched him, my chest tight with something that felt dangerously like hope. But hope was a fragile thing, and I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. A few days later, Ethan got a call from his older brother. Jake, who was visiting from Boston. Jake was everything Ethan was: stoic, traditional, the kind of guy who thought feelings were a waste of time. Ethan idolized him, and I could see the anxiety creeping in as the visit approached. Jake arrived on a Friday, all broad shoulders and booming voice. He hugged Ethan, then gave me a curt nod. "So, you're the roommate," he said, his tone neutral but his eyes assessing. I felt like I was under a microscope. That night, we went to a sports bar, Jake's choice. He dominated the conversation, talking about his job, his girlfriend, his plans to settle down. Ethan was quieter than usual, his eyes flicking to me every so often. I tried to keep up, but Jake's presence was suffocating. A reminder of the world Ethan had come from, a world that didn't leave much room for someone like me. As we walked home, Jake clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "You're doing all right, kid," he said. "Just don't let this city turn you soft." The words were casual, but they landed like a blow. Ethan laughed, but it was forced. I wondered what he wasn't saying, what he was still afraid of. The summer was racing toward its end, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were running out of time. Jake's visit left a shadow over the apartment. Ethan was quieter, more withdrawn, like he was carrying a weight he couldn't share. I wanted to ask him about it, but every time I tried, he'd change the subject or crack a joke. It was maddening, but I didn't push. I'd learned by now that pushing Ethan only made him retreat further. One night, I came home to find him sitting on the floor, surrounded by old photos. They were from his childhood, him and Jake fishing, family vacations, Ethan grinning with a missing tooth. He looked up, his eyes red. "I don't know who I am anymore, Luke," he said, his voice raw. "Jake keeps talking about the guy I used to be, but I don't think that guy exists anymore." I sat next to him, careful not to touch him. "You're still you," I said. "You're just figuring out more of who that is." He shook his head. "Jake would lose it if he knew how I feel about you. My whole family would. They're not like your mom, Luke. They don't get it." My mom had come out as a lesbian when I was 15, so I'd grown up with acceptance woven into my life. Ethan's family was different, small town, conservative, the kind of people who saw anything outside the norm as a threat. I'd always known that, but hearing him say it out loud made my chest ache. "You don't have to tell them anything until you're ready," I said. "This is about you, not them." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "What if I'm never ready?" The question hung between us, heavy and unanswered. I wanted to tell him I'd wait forever, but I wasn't sure that was true. I loved him, but I couldn't keep living in this in-between space, caught between hope and heartbreak. The next day, Ethan suggested we go to Pride. It was late August, and the city was alive with rainbows and glitter. I'd been going to Pride since I was a teenager, but Ethan had never shown interest before. "I just want to see what it's like," he said, his tone casual but his eyes nervous. We walked through the crowds, music blasting, people dancing and laughing. Ethan was quiet at first, taking it all in. Then a drag queen in a glittering gown pulled him into a dance, and he laughed, his face lighting up in a way I hadn't seen in weeks. For a moment, he looked free. Later, we sat on a bench, watching the parade. A group of queer teens walked by, holding hands, their faces bright with defiance and joy. Ethan's hand brushed mine, and he didn't pull away. "This feels right," he said softly. "Being here with you." My heart soared, but I kept my voice steady. "Yeah." He nodded, his fingers curling around mine. "I'm still scared, but I don't want to hide anymore." It wasn't a promise, but it was enough. We stayed there, hand in hand, as the world spun around us. For the first time, I felt like we were moving forward, not just in circles. But I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Ethan was still wrestling with his family, his past, his own identity. And I was wrestling with the fear that loving him might break me. That night, back in the apartment, Ethan kissed me. Not a hesitant brush like before, but a real kiss, full of intention and need. I kissed him back, my hands tangling in his hair, my heart racing. When we pulled apart, he rested his forehead against mine, his breath uneven. "I'm in this, Luke," he said. "I don't know what it means yet, but I'm in." I wanted to believe him. I did believe him. But as we fell asleep, his arms around me, I couldn't shake the feeling that the hardest part was still to come. The summer was almost over, and with it, the fragile bubble we'd built. Reality was waiting, and it wasn't going to be kind. September crept in, and with it, a chill that seemed to mirror the shift in our lives. Ethan and I were something undefined, but real. We didn't talk about labels, but we held hands in the dark, stole kisses in the kitchen, and fell asleep tangled together. It was exhilarating and terrifying, like standing on the edge of a cliff. But the outside world didn't care about our private moments. Ethan's family started calling more often, especially Jake, who was planning a big family reunion for Labor Day. Ethan grew tense every time his phone rang, his answers short and vague. I could see the guilt eating at him, the fear of disappointing the people he loved. One night, he got a call from his mom. I was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for dinner, when I heard his voice rise. "No, Mom, I'm not bringing anyone," he said, his tone sharp. "Can we not do this right now?" He hung up, tossing his phone onto the couch with a frustrated groan. I set the knife down, my stomach twisting. "Everything okay?" He didn't look at me. "She wants me to come home for the reunion. Keeps asking why I'm not dating anyone. I don't know what to tell her." I walked over, sitting next to him. "You don't have to tell her anything yet. Or ever, if you don't want to." He shook his head. "It's not that simple. They're my family, Luke. They expect me to be someone I'm not sure I am anymore." I wanted to fix it, to take away his pain, but I didn't know how. All I could do was be there, so I pulled him into a hug, letting him bury his face in my shoulder. "We'll figure it out," I whispered, even though I wasn't sure we would. The reunion was in Connecticut, a 3-hour train ride away. Ethan asked me to come with him, not as his boyfriend, but as his friend. "I need you there," he said, his eyes pleading. "I can't do this alone." I agreed, even though the idea of being around his family made my skin crawl. We took the train together, the countryside blurring past as we sat in silence. Ethan's leg bounced nervously, and I reached for his hand, squeezing it gently. He smiled, but it was strained. His family's house was a sprawling colonial, the kind of place that screamed old money and tradition. Jake greeted us at the door, his handshake firm and his eyes lingering on me a little too long. Ethan's parents were warm but reserved, their questions about my life polite but distant. I felt like an intruder, a secret they didn't know they were keeping. Dinner was a tense affair, with Jake dominating the conversation and Ethan's mom dropping not-so-subtle hints about grandchildren. Ethan barely ate, his hands clenched under the table. I wanted to reach for him, to tell him it was okay, but I couldn't. Not here. After dinner, Jake pulled Ethan aside for a brother talk. I stayed in the living room, making small talk with their cousins, but my eyes kept drifting to the hallway. When Ethan came back, his face was pale, his jaw tight. He grabbed my arm, pulling me outside to the backyard. "Jake knows," he said, his voice shaking. He saw us holding hands on the train. He's pissed. Luke. He says I'm throwing my life away. My heart sank. What did you say? I told him he doesn't get to decide who I am. Ethan said, his voice fierce. But he's not wrong about one thing. This is going to change everything. I cupped his face, forcing him to look at me. You're not throwing anything away. You're being honest. That's worth more than their approval. He leaned into my touch, his eyes shining with unshed tears. I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. You are, I said. And I'm right here. We stood there, hidden by the shadows of the oak trees, as the weight of his family's expectations pressed down on us. The reunion was only the beginning, a test of how far Ethan was willing to go to live his truth. And as I held him, I realized I was just as scared as he was not of his family, but of what loving him might cost us both. The train ride back to Brooklyn was silent, but not the comfortable kind. Ethan stared out the window, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. I wanted to ask what else Jake had said, but I could see he was still processing. When we got home, he went straight to his room, closing the door without a word. I stood in the hallway, my chest tight, wondering if I'd pushed him too far. The next morning, I found a note on the kitchen counter, gone for a walk. Need to think. I spent the day trying to distract myself, sketching, cleaning, anything to keep my mind off the fear that he was pulling away. When he finally came back, it was late, the city lights casting long shadows across the apartment. I talked to my mom, he said, sitting on the couch. Told her I'm figuring things out, that I might not be who she thinks I am. My heart stopped. What did she say? He rubbed his face, exhausted. She cried. Said she just wants me to be happy, but I could tell she's scared. She kept asking if I was sure, if I'd thought it through. I sat next to him, careful not to crowd him. And what did you say? I told her I'm in love with you, he said, his voice steady but soft. That I don't have all the answers, but I know that much. I froze, my breath catching. He'd said it before, but this was different. This was real, raw, undeniable. I reached for his hand, and he let me, his fingers warm against mine. I love you too, I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. He looked at me, his eyes full of something I couldn't quite name: relief, fear, hope. Then he kissed me, slow and deliberate, like he was making a promise. For the first time, I felt like we were on solid ground, even if it was shaky. But life doesn't let you stay in those moments. The next week, Ethan got a call from Jake, who wanted to meet up in the city. Ethan agreed, against my better judgment. I waited at the apartment, my stomach in knots, until he came back hours later, his face a storm of emotions. He thinks I'm confused, Ethan said, pacing the room. Says I'm throwing away my future for a phase. He kept talking about family, about what Dad would think if he were still alive. I stood, my hands clenched. He's wrong, Ethan. This isn't a phase. It's you. He stopped pacing, his eyes locking onto mine. I know. But he's my brother, Luke. He's always been there for me. What if he's right? The question cut deep, but I didn't let it show. He's not right. He's scared, just like you were. But you're stronger than that. Ethan nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering. We spent the rest of the night talking, not just about Jake, but about everything: our fears, our hopes, what we wanted this to be. By the time we fell asleep, I felt closer to him than ever, but I knew the battle wasn't over. The summer was gone, and fall was settling in, bringing a new kind of clarity. Ethan was trying to live authentically, But every step came with a cost. His family, his friends, the world he'd known, they were all pulling at him, trying to drag him back to the person he used to be. And I was caught in the middle, loving him through it all, hoping it would be enough. Fall arrived in a blaze of color, but the warmth of summer was gone, replaced by a crisp edge that mirrored the uncertainty in our lives. Ethan and I were together now, in a way that felt both fragile and fierce. We didn't have a name for it, but we didn't need one. What we had was enough until it wasn't. Jake's words lingered like a bruise. Ethan tried to brush them off, but I could see the toll they took. He was quieter, more hesitant, like he was second-guessing every move. I wanted to fix it, to make him see that he was enough. But I was learning that love couldn't erase someone's doubts. One night, we went to a party at Caleb's place. It was loud, crowded, the kind of chaos that usually made Ethan shine. But he stuck close to me, his hand brushing mine like he was anchoring himself. Caleb noticed, pulling me aside when Ethan went to grab drinks. "He's struggling," Caleb said, his voice low. "You both are. You sure you're ready for this?" I wanted to say yes, but the truth was, I wasn't sure. Loving Ethan was the easiest thing I'd ever done, but it was also the hardest. Every day felt like a gamble, a chance that he'd pull away or that I'd push too hard. But I looked at him across the room, laughing with a stranger, and I knew I'd keep betting on us. The turning point came in October. Ethan's mom called, asking him to come home for a weekend. She wanted to talk, just the two of them. He was terrified, but he went, and I stayed behind, my heart in my throat. When he came back, he looked lighter, like a weight had been lifted. She didn't understand at first, he said, sitting on the couch with me. But she listened. She said she loves me, no matter what. It's not perfect, but it's a start. I pulled him into a hug, my eyes stinging. "I'm proud of you," I whispered. He smiled, a real smile, the kind I hadn't seen since that summer night. "I'm proud of us," he said. "I don't know where this is going, Luke, but I want to find out. With you." We kissed, and it felt like a beginning, not an end. The road ahead was still uncertain. Jake was still distant, and Ethan's journey was far from over. But we were in it together, and that was enough. Months later, we stood on the fire escape, the city glittering below us. Ethan wrapped his arms around me, his chin resting on my shoulder. "That night," he said, his voice soft, "it changed everything." "Yeah," I said, leaning into him. "It changed me too." Our bond had been tested, stretched to its breaking point, but it held. We weren't just roommates anymore, or even just lovers. We were two people who'd chosen each other, against the odds, against the world. And as the city hummed around us, I knew that whatever came next, we'd face it together. Not because it was easy, but because it was worth it.